unfounded. The weight of his words hit me all at once. I wanted to cry, to let out all the tension I've been holding in, but I managed to hold it together. The investigator smiled kindly and said, "Go home to your wife and daughter, Mr. Scott. In my line of work, happy endings like this are rare." I thanked him, though my voice cracked, and left his office. Instead of heading straight home, I went back to the motel to collect my thoughts. I needed a little more time to process everything before I could face Michelle. By Monday morning, I felt ready to make the call. When Michelle answered, her voice was cautious. "Hello. It's me," I said softly. There was a brief pause before she responded, her voice trembling. Carol, I'm so sorry. I don't know what to do if you don't come back to us. I've tried to stay strong for Margaret, but I can't stop crying. I realize now how much I took you for granted. You were right. I should have made it clear to that man that I was with my husband, and not interested. I disrespected you, and I don't know why I acted that way. Carol, I love you, and I promise I'll never make that mistake again. Please, give me another chance. Her words caught me off guard. This wasn't the Michelle I had seen at the dance hall. This was my wife, the woman I loved. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond, and she must have sensed my hesitation. "You're not coming back, are you?" she asked, her voice breaking with despair. "No, Michelle," I said. "Finally, I'm coming back, but only on a trial basis. I want the woman I fell in love with, the one I married. Can you promise me she's still here?" "She is," Michelle said earnestly. "I swear, Carol, I'll do whatever it takes." "We'll see," I replied cautiously. After everything, the attitude, the lack of intimacy, the disrespect, it's going to take time. I need to stop by the motel after work to get my things, but I'll be home tonight. Carol, I love you, she said tearfully. I'm so sorry for the way I treated you. I don't want to lose you. When I got home that evening, Margaret was waiting for me at the door, oblivious to what had been happening between her parents. Michelle stood behind her, looking hesitant but hopeful. As soon as I stepped inside, she wrapped me in a hug, kissing me repeatedly. I kissed her back, and in that moment, I felt something stir, a reminder of how much I still loved her. That was 2 years ago. Looking back, it was the turning point our marriage needed. Since then, things have been incredible. Michelle is the woman I fell in love with, both inside and outside the bedroom. A few months ago, she surprised me with a birthday party, something we'd never done before, and it's become a tradition. This year, for our 14th wedding anniversary, she planned the entire evening. When I came home from work, she greeted me with tickets to a dinner playhouse to see Man of La Mancha, one of my favorite plays. After dinner and the play, we took a leisurely drive down to the lakefront. The beach was bathed in soft moonlight, and a gentle breeze carried the fresh scent of the lake. It felt like a scene out of a romantic movie. As we strolled hand in hand along the shore, I whispered, "I love you," the words spilling out like they had in the early days of our marriage. "I love you so much," Michelle replied, her eyes sparkling with warmth and affection. In that moment, it felt like we were back in the honeymoon phase of our relationship, a reminder of everything that made us fall in love in the first place. The glorious side of the story. Another harsh Chicago winter was finally giving way to spring. As Michelle stepped outside, she took a deep breath, savoring the fresh, birthy scent left behind by the morning dew and a gentle April shower. She smiled as memories of being wrapped in Carol's arms in their warm bed filled her mind, a feeling of security she cherished deeply. On her way to the car, Michelle noticed wild blue flowers peeking through the lawn, a reminder of how nature always finds a way to bloom again after even the harshest winters. The sight stirred something in her, a longing for renewal and a fresh start, much like the one spring always seemed to promise. Humming along to the cheerful tunes on the car radio, Michelle made her way to the quaint coffee shop where she was, meeting Sophia, an old friend she hadn't seen in a while. Sophia's son was the same age as Margaret, and the two women had met years ago at a school function. Over time, their shared experiences as moms had blossomed into a deep friendship. When Michelle arrived, Sophia had already snagged a cozy table by the window. Through the glass, they exchanged smiles and waved enthusiastically. Michelle joined the line, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee filling the bustling cafe. Moments later, they hugged warmly before settling into their seats. "It's been too long," Michelle said, beaming. "How have you been?" "Busy, as always," Sophia replied, laughing. She launched into updates about her family, recounting the joys and challenges of raising a preteen. They reminisced about school functions and shared stories about their kids, marveling at how quickly time had flown. Then Sophia leaned in, her voice dropping conspiratorially. "Can you keep a secret?" "Of course," Michelle replied, her curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" Sophia hesitated before confessing, excitement dancing in her eyes. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but I've been seeing someone." Michelle froze her coffee halfway to her lips. "You mean you're thinking about having an affair?" Sophia's lips curled into a playful smile. "We haven't crossed any lines yet, but I'm seriously considering it. It's Eric. He's just different. Being with him makes me feel alive. But I'm worried he'll lose interest if I don't take it to the next level." "Wait a minute," Michelle interrupted, concern creeping into her voice. "Have you thought about what you're risking? Are you really prepared to jeopardize your marriage for this?" Sophia shrugged, brushing off the question. "Oh, I'm not leaving Peter or anything. It's just a little excitement on the side. You know, like they say, variety is the spice of life. Don't worry, I'd make sure Peter never found out. He'd be devastated if he knew. Besides, Eric's married too. We'd have to be discreet." Michelle's stomach churned. Torn between loyalty to her friend and her own moral compass, she wrestled with what to say. After 2 years of keeping her own secret buried, she decided to take a leap of faith and confide in Sophia. "Sophia," Michelle began hesitantly, "do you remember when Carol and I hit a rough patch a couple of years ago? When he left me for a little while?" "Of course," Sophia replied, her tone serious. "But you never really talked about it." Michelle took a deep breath. "I need you to swear you won't repeat what I'm about to tell you. If this ever got out, it could ruin my marriage." "I promise," Sophia said solemnly, leaning closer. "You can trust me." Michelle hesitated, her voice dropping to a whisper. 2 years ago, I felt stuck. After 12 years of marriage, everything had started to feel routine. I loved Carol with all my heart, but I couldn't shake the sense of emptiness, like something was missing. I didn't know who I was anymore. Sophia nodded, her eyes reflecting, understanding. "I get it. I think a lot of women go through that. It's not that you don't love your husband. It's just complicated." "Exactly," Michelle said, grateful for the validation. "Carol's my favorite person in the world. But nothing felt exciting anymore. Not even sex. And it wasn't his fault. He tried everything to make me happy, but I just couldn't shake this cloud hanging over me." She paused to sip her coffee, gauging Sophia's reaction. Seeing her friend's attentive expression, Michelle continued, "I didn't know how to tell Carol what I was feeling. Instead, I withdrew, and he noticed. It drove a wedge between us, and before I knew it, we were barely speaking. One night, he caught me glancing at another man at a dance club, and it all came to a head. Carol left me that night. He packed a bag and was gone by the time I got home. What did you do?" Sophia asked, leaning in. I panicked, Michelle admitted. I realized how much I'd hurt him, and that I was on the verge of losing everything. It took time, but we worked through it. I had to face my own issues and make amends. We came out stronger in the end, but it wasn't easy. She reached across the table and took Sophia's hand. Listen to me. Whatever excitement you think you'll find with Eric, it's not worth risking your marriage. The fallout could destroy your family and yourself. Michelle's voice softened as she continued. And then I met Austin. Sophia leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. You had an affair. Michelle shook her head solemnly. Not quite. Thankfully, I came to my senses before it ever became physical, she admitted with a heavy sigh. It started so innocently, or at least, that's what I told myself at the time. She paused, her gaze distant as if replaying the memory. It was at that little grocery store on Marshall Avenue. I was just there to grab a few things, but then I saw him. Oh, Sophia, he was absolutely stunning, ruggedly handsome, with sandy, blonde hair and the most mesmerizing blue eyes I'd ever seen. He was tall, like Robert Redford, and his build was just perfect. Even fully dressed, you could tell he was fit. I couldn't stop staring at him, and then he caught me. Michelle chuckled bitterly. I felt like a teenager, blushing like crazy, when he smiled back at me. It was thrilling, almost forbidden. We started flirting, and for the first time in a long while, I felt seen. But eventually I remembered why I was there, and forced myself to focus on shopping. She smiled wistfully. But wouldn't you know it? As I reached for some tomatoes in the produce aisle, I accidentally bumped into him. Those piercing blue eyes met mine, and he greeted me with the most charming smile. I hate to admit it, Sophia, but in that moment, I could feel something stir in me, something I hadn't felt in years. It was embarrassing. I prayed he couldn't sense how flustered I was. Sophia's brow furrowed as she listened intently. Michelle continued. He extended his hand and introduced himself, as if he didn't even notice my wedding ring. And he wasn't deterred by it either. That was flattering in its own twisted way. Imagine a man like him showing interest in someone like me. We chatted and laughed as we picked out our groceries. By the time we reached the checkout, he handed me his number and suggested we meet for lunch the following week. Sophia's eyes widened. What did you do? I was going to throw his card away as soon as I left the store, Michelle confessed, but I didn't. Instead, I stuck it in my purse. All the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about him. And then Carol walked through the door while I was putting the groceries away. I already felt so guilty that I snapped at him when he offered to help. Poor Carol, he just asked if something was wrong. What could I say to that? I lied, told him I was tired from shopping. The truth was, I couldn't stop thinking about Austin. I was on cloud 9. Sophia let out a small gasp, but Michelle pressed on. I knew it was wrong to call him. I knew I shouldn't, but the way I was feeling, I was vulnerable. I told myself no, over and over, but I couldn't resist. I found one of the last payphones in the city and dialed his number. We arranged to meet for lunch the next day. Michelle paused to sip her coffee, while Sophia sat on the edge of her seat, waiting. When we met at the restaurant, my emotions were all over the place. Excitement, fear, desire. It was like nothing I'd ever experienced before. At one point during the meal, Austin reached across the table and clasped my hand. I was overwhelmed by the urge to cross a line I couldn't uncross. But guilt, or maybe fear, held me back. She sighed. Austin didn't push, but he didn't back off, either. He started planting little seeds, subtly chipping away at Carol. He painted a picture of my husband as unworthy of me, as someone who didn't truly appreciate me. And I fell for it. I started resenting Carol, believing Austin's version of things. Before I realized it, he'd manipulated me into doubting my own marriage. Sophia shook her head, her expression a mix of shock and recognition. That sounds so much like my situation. That's exactly why I'm telling you this, Michelle said earnestly. I want you to understand what you might be stepping into. Has your guy started mentioning Peter yet? Making comments about him? Sophia hesitated, then nodded. Well, he's asked a few questions. Like, does Peter know how lucky he is to have me? Stuff like that. Michelle nodded knowingly. That's how it starts. And then, before you know it, you're looking at your husband through a lens of dissatisfaction. You start thinking he doesn't deserve you. Sophia, think about it. What kind of man engages in an affair with a married woman? Can you imagine Peter doing something like that? Peter. Never, Sophia said firmly. He'd never do that. And yet, here you are, considering a man who would, Michelle said gently. That's what you need to ask yourself. Is this the kind of man you really want in your life? Sophia was quiet, clearly lost in thought. Michelle continued. Austin and I had lunch again the next week. By the third time, I was teetering on the edge. He suggested we go back to his apartment. I could tell he was getting frustrated with my excuses, and I knew that if we met again, it would happen. I would cross that line. But then, something stopped me. What was it? Sophia asked, her voice barely audible. Carol, Michelle said simply. Our anniversary was coming up, and I'd mentioned to Austin that I needed to shop for a new dress. He made some snide comment about how Carol probably wouldn't even notice. And in that moment, I realized how wrong I was to be there, listening to a man who had no respect for my husband or my marriage. She leaned forward, gripping Sophia's hand. That moment saved me. And it could save you too, if you listen to what I'm saying. Don't let a moment of weakness destroy everything you've built. I mentioned to Austin that Carol and I might visit a dance club we used to frequent, Michelle continued, her voice tinged with regret. I was reminiscing about the fun times Carol and I had there, thinking it would be a nice way to celebrate our anniversary. But Austin saw an opportunity and immediately pounced on it. He declared that he'd meet us there and dance with me. I tried to warn him against it, reminding him that it was a special night for Carol and me, and that dancing with someone else could upset my husband. What did he say to that? Sophia asked, her brows knitting in concern. Michelle sighed heavily. He just brushed it off, saying it would teach Carol a lesson. He claimed that seeing another man show interest in me might make Carol appreciate me more. It was so manipulative, but at the time, I didn't see it that way. Sophia's eyes widened. Oh, Michelle, he didn't actually show up, did he? Michelle nodded solemnly. He did. The moment we stepped into the club, I spotted him. I didn't acknowledge him and tried to focus on Carol. We were enjoying ourselves, laughing and dancing. But then Austin approached. Bold as anything, he asked. Me to dance. Oh no, Sophia whispered, horrified. It gets worse, Michelle said, shaking her head. He completely ignored Carol, as if he wasn't even there. Worse, he was downright rude to him. Carol was understandably offended. He gave me an ultimatum. If I danced with Austin, he'd leave. What did you do? Sophia asked cautiously. Michelle's eyes brimmed with emotion. I was upset, and, in the heat of the moment, I insisted I'd dance with Austin anyway. Carol warned me he wouldn't be there when we were finished, but I thought, who takes those kinds of threats seriously? She paused, wiping a tear from her cheek before continuing. As we danced, I confronted Austin about his behavior toward Carol. I asked why he had to be so disrespectful. He just smirked and said he wanted to put Carol in his place. Sophia gasped. What? That's horrible. Michelle nodded. He kept me close while we danced, but the whole time, my mind was on Carol. I kept wondering if he was watching, getting angrier by the second. I was so distracted. I didn't even notice when one song ended and another began. Finally, when the music stopped, I told Austin we were done. I said I was spending the rest of the night with my husband and headed back to our table. Did he leave? You alone? Sophia asked, her voice trembling with anticipation. No, Michelle said bitterly. He followed me. When I asked what he was doing, he said he wanted to apologize to Carol. I didn't believe him for a second. I thought he was trying to stir up more trouble between Carol and me, maybe hoping to exploit the tension he'd created. What would he gain from that? Sophia asked, frowning. I think he wanted to drive a wedge between us, Michelle explained. He hadn't succeeded in seducing me, so I imagine he thought if Carol and I had a big enough fight, I'd turn to him for comfort. Maybe he thought he'd end up consoling me, in his bed. Sophia shuddered. That's disgusting. I assumed Carol had gone to the restroom, so I urged Austin to go back to his table. Michelle continued. He finally left, but not without dragging his feet. When the waitress came by, Austin took the opportunity to order drinks for us and asked if we wanted to open another tap. That's when she mentioned Carol had already closed out the bill. I froze. Sophia's hand shot to her mouth. He left. Michelle nodded, her voice cracking. Sophia. It felt like my entire married life was flashing before my eyes. I couldn't believe he'd just abandoned me like that. I was devastated. Sophia reached out, grasping Michelle's hand. You don't have to tell me all of this, Michelle, she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. Maybe we should stop here. No, Michelle said firmly. I need to tell you everything. You need to understand the whole picture. It's important. She took a moment to compose herself before continuing. I immediately grabbed my phone and called Carol, begging him to come back and pick me up. That's when he dropped the bombshell he thought I was having an affair with Austin. He said he was going home to pack a bag and leave, and he wasn't sure if he'd come back. Sophia's eyes filled with sympathy as Michelle reached for a napkin to dab her tears. I was blindsided, Sophia. It was like everything came into focus in that moment. It wasn't Carol who had been taking me for granted. It was me. Carol had done everything he could to support me, and I'd been so caught up in my own feelings that I didn't see it. What about Austin? Sophia asked, her tone cautious. What was he doing during all of this? Oh, he wasn't giving up, Michelle said, her voice bitter. He said Carol didn't deserve me and urged me to go home with him instead. I shut him down immediately, but he laughed it off and kept pushing. When the cab I'd called finally pulled up, he tried to make a move. That was the last straw. I kneed him in the groin and told him that if he ever contacted me again, I'd file a sexual harassment lawsuit. Sophia let out a small laugh, despite the tension. Good for you. Michelle wiped away more tears. By the time I got home, Carol was gone. I tried calling him, but his phone was off. Sophia. I was terrified. I could see my marriage crumbling before my eyes. Everything we had built together felt like it was slipping away the next day. I tried to reach Carol at work, desperate to speak with him, but he refused to take my calls. His secretary told me he'd even asked the receptionist not to let me into the office if I showed up. That rejection stung deeply. Feeling utterly lost, I turned to Teresa, our neighbor. Carol had always trusted her, and I hoped she might convince him to talk to me. Teresa, being the kind soul she is, agreed to help. To my surprise, Carol did respond to her, but only to say he needed time. He promised to contact me in a couple of weeks, and Teresa relayed his message with a sympathetic look. I knew then that pressuring him would only push him further away, so I decided to respect his wishes and give him the space he'd asked for. Those 2 weeks were agonizing. I tried to stay strong, especially when Margaret was around, but every time I was alone, the tears would flow. I told her that Carol was away on a trip, but inside I was consumed with fear that I had ruined everything. Carol's anger had been so evident, I wasn't sure he'd ever come back, especially if he believed I'd been unfaithful. Michelle paused, her voice faltering as she fought back tears. "I'm sorry," she said, looking at Sophia with watery eyes. "Even after all this time, it's still hard to talk about." Sophia reached out, placing a comforting hand on her friend's arm. "Take your time," she said gently. Michelle took a deep breath and continued. Eventually, Carol called. When he told me he was coming home, I could hardly believe it. Relief doesn't even begin to describe how I felt. It made me realize how much I valued him and the life we'd built together. Sophia, that experience taught me an important lesson. Love must always win out over desire. I love Carol, and he loves me. There's no man on this earth worth jeopardizing that for. Sophia sat back thoughtfully. "Wow," she said softly. "You're absolutely right. I can't even imagine what I'd do if Peter left me." Michelle hesitated before answering Sophia's next question. "Did you ever tell Carol the truth?" "Are you kidding?" Michelle said, shaking her head vigorously. "After nearly losing him, I couldn't risk something like that happening again. I live with the fear that one day he might find out. But since he came home, I've done everything I can to be the best wife I can be. I never take him or our marriage for granted anymore. Every day, I thank my lucky stars for what I have and show Carol how much he means to me with every ounce of love I can give. All I can do is hope it's enough." Sophia smiled warmly. "Thank you, Michelle. You've saved me from making a huge mistake. I really needed to hear your story." The two women continued chatting for a while longer, sharing laughter and memories. Before parting, they promised to meet again soon. Michelle felt lighter, knowing she'd helped her friend avoid a decision she might have regretted for the rest of her life. Later that afternoon, Margaret came home from school, greeted by her mom with a snack and a kiss. Michelle couldn't help but marvel at how fast her little girl was growing up. Margaret would be 10 in just 2 months. Where does the time go? Michelle thought. When Carol came home from work that evening, Michelle welcomed him with her warmest smile and a tight embrace. Talking to Sophia earlier had been a powerful reminder of the life Michelle had almost lost, and of how precious it was now. That night, after putting Margaret to bed, Carol and Michelle decided to build a snowman together in the backyard. The cold air was crisp and invigorating, and their laughter rang out into the night. Later, as they lay in bed, Carol fell asleep quickly, his breathing soft and steady. Michelle shifted onto her side, propping herself up on one elbow to watch him. She traced the lines on his face, each one a mark of time and the memories they'd shared. Her heart swelled with love and gratitude as she gently leaned down to kiss him. Carol stirred, a sleepy smile spreading across his lips as he pulled her into his arms. "I thought you were asleep," Michelle whispered. "I was lying here thinking about what to get Margaret for her birthday," he murmured. Michelle smiled, running her fingers through his hair. "And what does our little girl need?" "A baby brother or sister," Carol replied with a grin. Michelle raised an eyebrow. "Oh, really?" "I'm serious," Carol said, his tone warmed but insistent. "It's something I've been thinking about for a while." "Well," Michelle teased, "her birthday is only 2 months away. We'd better get started." "You read my mind," Carol whispered, pulling her closer. 2 months later, Margaret celebrated her 10th birthday with a grand backyard party. Michelle and Carol had gone all out, inviting all her friends and setting up games, treats, and plenty of cake and ice cream. As the party wound down, Carol and Michelle surprised their daughter with one final gift, a card revealing that she'd soon have a baby brother. Margaret squealed with delight, and the backyard filled with laughter and cheers. Michelle looked at Carol, her heart brimming with love. It hadn't been an easy road, but they'd made it through together. and now their family was growing stronger with each passing day. Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale. I often catch myself wondering if I'm really the kind of husband I should be. My job demands a lot from me, and honestly, there are days when I walk through the door in a mood that's less than cheerful. I'm no financial wizard either. We're not rolling in money, but we get by just fine. Our home is cozy, we drive 2 nice cars, and my wife has a closet full of beautiful outfits. Our 8-year-old daughter, Margaret, has everything she needs, and then some, considering her collection of pricey toys. I see myself as a simple, hard-working man who loves his family fiercely. Michelle and I have been married for nearly 12 years, but lately, something seems off. There's a distance between us, subtle but undeniable, and I can't quite put my finger on it. Michelle's been acting differently, distant and a little cold, which isn't like her at all. She started picking at me over small, trivial things, and I can't help but notice it. When I've tried asking if something's bothering her, she waves it off, blaming it on being tired or just having a rough day. At first I thought it might help to give her some space, hoping she'd sort through whatever was troubling her. But her aloofness has been dragging on, and honestly, it's starting to get under my skin. As anyone married can tell you, relationship troubles don't stay confined to conversation. They seep into every part of your life, including the bedroom. I've always believed in keeping our love life fun and spontaneous. I'm a romantic at heart, and I've made a habit of surprising Michelle with things like a dozen roses after a long day at work, hoping to set the mood. These gestures usually led to special moments together, but lately, all I get in return is a polite thank you and maybe a peck on the cheek. It feels like she's misunderstanding my efforts, almost as if she sees them as me apologizing for something I didn't do. Weeks passed, and Michelle showed no interest in intimacy. Her responses to my advances ranged from, "I'm not in the mood," to the classic, "I've got a headache." On the rare occasions she did agree, she was distant, passive, leaving it all to me. It hurt more than I let on. Over time, I found myself pulling back. I'd come home, spend time with Margaret, and steer clear of Michelle, which only made things worse. Frustration and desperation began to creep in. At work, I'd sit and think about how this all started, replaying moments in my head, trying to figure out if I'd done something to cause the shift. No matter how hard I thought, I couldn't land on an answer. Yet one unsettling thought kept circling back. No matter how much I tried to push it away, could Michelle be having an affair? The idea was almost too painful to entertain. I told myself over and over that she'd never betray our marriage. But the more I tried to connect the dots, the more it felt like there was someone else in the picture. Me, Michelle, and some mystery person. Curiosity got the best of me, and I started reading articles about the signs of infidelity. I looked for clues, changes in her behavior, her wardrobe, her routines. To be fair, I didn't notice anything too drastic. Michelle looked the same and seemed to keep her usual habits. Then again, I only really saw her in the evenings after work. Who's to say what she was up to during the day? Some signs felt uncomfortably familiar, especially her emotional withdrawal. I thought about hiring a private investigator but quickly dismissed it. Without any concrete evidence, it seemed like a drastic and unjustified move. All I had were suspicions, nothing solid enough to back up such an expense. So, I decided to take matters into my own hands. First, I tried calling home during the day, hoping to catch her there. Sometimes she was, and sometimes she wasn't. The inconsistency gnawed at me, so I went a step further. I dug out an old surveillance camera from the garage and set it up discreetly, tucked under the eaves and connected to a hidden tape recorder buried behind some paint cans. I figured I could monitor any unusual activity, like unfamiliar cars pulling into our driveway. For 2 weeks, I watched the footage. Nothing suspicious. Showed up, no strange vehicles or odd visitors. There were moments when I'd see Michelle leave the house, though she later claimed she'd been home all day. Her trips were brief, seemingly too short for anything significant to happen, unless her supposed partner was incredibly efficient. Those outings didn't prove much, except that she wasn't being entirely truthful. Still, I was no closer to uncovering the truth. Meanwhile, Michelle's mood continued to spiral downward, and our intimate life dwindled to almost nothing. The lack of connection was maddening, and resentment began to build. With our 12th anniversary around the corner, I decided it was time to do something to reignite the spark in our marriage. We decided to go out for a night on the town, something we hadn't done in ages. I thought maybe dinner and dancing could rekindle the spark between us. We arranged for Margaret to spend the night at my parents' house, giving us the freedom to relax without watching the clock. To make the evening special, I booked us a table at Plato's, a restaurant Michelle had always adored. My hope was to bring back some of the magic from our early days together. When we arrived, the maitre d' led us to our table. I was ready to relive the charm of our younger years, but I noticed Michelle seemed a little on edge. I couldn't quite figure out why. To lighten the mood, I ordered a bottle of wine, which seemed to do the trick. Slowly, she started to unwind, and our conversation became more playful and natural, like it used to be. By the time we finished dinner, Michelle seemed eager to dance, which had always been one of our shared passions. I suggested we try out a new club, but Michelle preferred our usual spot, a cozy venue with soft lighting and music that catered to an older crowd. It wasn't hard to agree. The place had the kind of ambiance that made you want to linger and dancing. There had always felt intimate and nostalgic. Once we arrived, we grabbed a small, secluded table, ordered a couple of drinks, and eventually made our way to the dance floor. As the music played, we lost ourselves in the rhythm, moving with the same energy and chemistry that had first brought us together. For a while, it felt like we had stepped back in time. After nearly an hour of dancing, we decided to take a break and returned to our table. Michelle sipped her wine and excused herself to the restroom. I watched her cross the dance floor with her usual grace, feeling a glimmer of intimacy and pride. But then, my thoughts shifted when I noticed I wasn't the only one captivated by her. Across the room, a handsome man sat alone at a corner table, his eyes fixed on Michelle. My chest tightened as I caught what seemed like a fleeting exchange between them. Did they know each other? As Michelle disappeared into the restroom, I felt the man's gaze shift toward me, a smug expression crossing his face. It was a dance club, sure, but I couldn't understand why he was sitting there alone. I told myself that maybe his date was also in the restroom, but something about the way he watched her unsettled me. When Michelle returned and asked me to get another glass of wine, I hesitated. I didn't like the idea of leaving her alone, especially with that man lurking nearby. Still, I waved down a waitress to speed things up, though Michelle's impatient glances told me she was getting annoyed. As I handed her the wine, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Glancing over my shoulder, I saw the same man still sitting alone. My suspicion deepened. "Who's the guy in the corner?" I asked Michelle, keeping my voice even. She looked momentarily startled, and for a split second, I thought I saw panic in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a casual smile. "What guy?" she replied, her tone light but tinged with discomfort. "The one you glanced at on your way to the bathroom," I pressed, trying not to sound accusatory. Michelle denied it immediately. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, brushing it off. But before I could push further, the man himself approached our table, walking straight past me as if I didn't exist. With a confident smile, he asked Michelle to dance. "No thanks," I said firmly, cutting him off before she could respond. My tone left no room for argument, but instead of backing off, the man smirked and replied, "I was talking to the lady." His arrogance lit a fire in me. "Yeah, well, the lady is my wife, and I decide who she dances with," I shot back, my voice tight with controlled anger. Michelle stepped in, trying to calm the situation. "Carol, you're being rude," she said gently, though her words stung. "Rude. Do you even know this guy?" I asked, turning to her. "He's the one I was talking about. I don't appreciate him approaching my wife like that." The man tried to interject, but I shut him down. "I'm talking to my wife, not you," I said sharply. Then I turned back to Michelle. If he had the decency to ask if I minded, I might have considered it. But now, absolutely not. Michelle looked at me with exasperation, her patience clearly running thin. "Carol, you're being ridiculous," she snapped, her tone sharper than I'd ever heard before. "There's nothing going on here. Yes, we're married, but you don't own me. I'm not your slave. If I want to dance with someone, I will." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Michelle had never spoken to me with such disrespect. I was furious, but forced myself to keep my temper in check. Then she added, her voice softening slightly, "Honey, I just want to have a little fun." "Michelle," I said, trying to keep my tone steady, "it's our anniversary. I want us both to enjoy the night. But I don't see how sitting here and watching you dance with another man is supposed to be fun, especially after I've told you how I feel about it. If you go ahead and dance with him, you might as well ask him to take you home too, because I won't be here when you get back. After 12 years together, this is where I draw the line." Her face was a mixture of defiance and frustration, but I could still sense an underlying emotion she wasn't expressing. I couldn't understand how she didn't recognize the hurt written all over my face either. She took a sharp breath and then said, with a calmness that cut deeper than any shout, "It's rude to keep this gentleman waiting while we argue. I'm going to dance with him, and we can sort this out later." The man standing next to her looked downright smug as he extended his hand, and to my disbelief, Michelle took it without hesitation. They walked off toward the dance floor together, leaving me sitting there stunned. I watched them until they disappeared into the crowd, then quietly slipped out of the club. I doubted either of them even noticed I was gone. By the time my phone rang, I was already several blocks away, driving aimlessly. Michelle's voice was sharp and upset when I answered. "Carol, where the hell are you?" "I'm on my way home," I replied, curtly. "I'm packing a bag." "What do you mean, packing a bag? Where are you going?" she demanded, her tone shifting from anger to confusion. "I don't know yet. I admit it. I just need space. I've had enough." "You're not serious," Michelle exclaimed, her voice rising. "It was just one dance, for God's sake. Are you really going to throw away 12 years of marriage over this?" "It's not just about the dance, Michelle," I snapped, struggling to stay calm. "Why would you even want to stay married to someone you clearly don't respect? I haven't caught you red-handed, but I'm starting to believe you're cheating on me, maybe even with that guy you just danced with. I saw the way you looked at him earlier and the way he looked at me, like I was nothing. He treated me like the husband of a woman he's already involved with." Her voice softened, and she spoke quickly, almost desperately. "Carol, I love you. I respect you. I swear there's nothing going on with that guy. I don't even know his name. Why would you think I'd cheat on you?" "Because it feels like you already have," I said bluntly. "We haven't been intimate in weeks. And when we are, it's like you're not even there. For months, you've been short-tempered, distant, and dismissive. If you're not cheating, you're doing a damn good impression of it." There was a long pause, and when she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost broken. "I'm sorry, Carol," she said. "I didn't realize how much I've hurt you. I'm sorry for tonight and for everything else. I swear to you, I'm not having an affair." Yes, the man was attractive. Anyone could see that, but I didn't even think about it like that. "Please, just come back and pick me up." "No," I said, my voice cold and resolute. "I told you, if you danced with him, you'd have to find your own way home. I meant it. I'm already pulling into the driveway, and by the time you get back, I'll be gone. If you really are having an affair, maybe you should stay with him and stop pretending with me." Her voice cracked. "Please, Carol, believe me. I'm not having an affair. I'll call a cab, but please stay there until I get home. We need to talk this through. Don't leave me like this." The line went dead, and I sat for a moment in the driveway, staring into the dark. Then I grabbed a bag, threw in some clothes, and left the house. I didn't linger. Within 12 minutes, I was gone. But as I drove down the block, curiosity got the better of me. Pulling over with my headlights off, I waited to see if Michelle would follow through. 15 minutes later, a yellow cab pulled into the driveway. She stepped out alone, hurried inside, and disappeared. That was all I needed to see. I turned the key and drove to a motel for the night. My phone started buzzing almost as soon as I checked in, but I turned it off. I had no concrete proof that Michelle had been unfaithful, but the suspicion wouldn't leave me. It gnawed me. The thought that with me out of the house, she might run to him for comfort. The next day, I decided I couldn't sit on these doubts any longer. Flipping through the yellow pages, I found a private investigator and scheduled an appointment. At his office, I laid out everything I'd noticed and handed over a retainer to get started. Now, all I could do was wait. Back at work, my secretary, Megan, told me Michelle had already called 20 times. I told her not to forward the calls and explained why. I also made it clear that if Michelle showed up in person, she wasn't to be allowed in. I needed time and space to figure out the truth. Later that afternoon, my neighbor Teresa called. I hesitated before picking up, but I answered. "Carol," she said gently, "Michelle told me what happened the other night. She's been trying to apologize, but she says you won't even speak to her." "That's right," I replied flatly. "I don't have anything left to say." Teresa sighed. "She mentioned that you think she's cheating. Do you really believe that?" "I do. I admit it. Her behavior has been off for months, and the other night only confirmed what I've suspected. I saw the way she looked at that man, and I'm not crazy. There was something there. He was completely disrespectful to me," I told Teresa, the frustration clear in my voice. And despite my warning, Michelle chose to back him up. She didn't just ignore my feelings. She outright dismissed them. Honestly, I can't shake the feeling that there's something going on between them. "Carol, you're jumping to conclusions," Teresa replied, her tone calm but firm. "I've been your neighbor for years, and if Michelle were cheating on you, I'd have noticed. There haven't been any unfamiliar cars at your house, no strange men coming and going. She knows dancing with that guy was a mistake. She was upset because you told her not to, but she realizes now that you were right. Trust me, Carol. Michelle wouldn't cheat on you. I know her too well." "I'm not so sure anymore, Teresa," I said, shaking my head. Her actions that night didn't exactly scream loyalty or love. "Please, Carol," she urged, her voice softening. "Talk to her. You're not going to resolve anything by refusing to communicate." I knew Teresa was making sense, but I wasn't ready to face Michelle yet. I needed time for the private investigator to do his job, and time to process everything. "Teresa, if you could let Michelle know I'll call her in a couple of weeks, that'd be great," I said. "I just need a little more space." "Okay, Carol," she agreed reluctantly. "I'll pass on the message, but please promise me you'll call her." "I will," I assured her. The next couple of weeks were agonizing. I checked in with the investigator a few times, but he kept telling me there wasn't much to report. Finally, he called and asked me to come to his office. Sitting there, waiting for him to speak, I could feel my nerves fraying. He handed me a manila envelope, and my hands trembled as I opened it. "If you'd rather skip the details," he said, "just turn to page 5. I flipped straight to the marked page, my heart pounding. Near the bottom, the words jumped out at me. After a thorough investigation, this office has found no evidence to support the client's suspicions of infidelity on the part of his spouse. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. Relief and disbelief warred within me as I looked up at the investigator. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice tinged with doubt. "Mr. Scott," he replied calmly, "my team has monitored your wife closely over the past few weeks. We've tracked her movements, reviewed her communications, and followed her wherever she's gone. We also examined her phone records and credit card statements. There's absolutely no sign of an affair. I'm happy to tell you that your suspicions were